Alright guys, welcome back. So on deck today is going to be another ballistics test. This time we're going to be talking about hard cast rounds, particularly penetration against large game. So what we're using is a 9mm, 10mm, and 45 Super. And we're using all Underwood ammo, the 147 grain plus P 9mm, the 220 grain 10mm, and the 45 Super 255 grain. These are all the coated projectiles. These are relatively new, or these are actually new production. And the 147 grain Underwood loading is very similar to the Buffalo Bore 147 grain plus P loading, and we actually have real world data on use against a bear with that projectile. So this should give us a pretty good baseline comparison to go from, where we actually have real world data to show how maybe this might translate. It should be a pretty interesting comparison. For the guns, we have the G34 Gen 5 9mm. This is the Glock marksman barrel, and I believe this is about a 5 1/4 or 5.35 inch. I'm not quite sure, somewhere up in there, inch barrel. Tried to keep the barrel lengths about as fair as possible. In our 10mm, we're using the Gen 4 G20. This is a 6-inch Glock factory barrel. And in our HK Mark 23, this is HK's version of a Desert Eagle. We have the factory 5.6 inch barrel. Again, chronograph results on these rounds, I got about 1140 feet per second on the 9mm, 1175 on the 10mm, and 1100 on the 45 Super. And just a point of note, the 10mm, my low was about 1148, my high was about 1198, and my average was 1175-ish. There was more deviation in the 10mm than in the 45 Super and 9mm. These stayed relatively close, within about 20 feet per second for the different rounds. For some reason, a 10mm had a larger spread. Nonetheless, I think the 10mm is coming out on top in terms of energy and velocity, even with that larger spread. So our target setup is going to be standard 1 gallon milk jugs, approximately 6 inches thick. Typically what we see is about 1.5 times penetration that we see in ordnance gel. And we're going to throw in this 3/4 inch red oak board to simulate a hard barrier, like a heavy bone or something. This is some dense hard stuff, so I'm hoping we can tone down the penetration enough to where we'll be able to capture these rounds and be able to see, hopefully we'll be able to see if there's actually any difference between these two. If we just shoot these just through straight water, we're probably not going to learn anything. We'll probably penetrate 5 feet or so, and who knows if we could even catch the round. Really wouldn't learn anything. So by throwing the hard barrier in there, hopefully we'll be able to actually get some measurable data out of this. Again, the 9mm is going to be the baseline comparison, so we're going to knock that out first. But first, I will show you the setup, and then we'll get this going. All right, and here's the setup. We have our 1 gallon water jug. Again, this is approximately 6 inches thick. And then we have our 3/4 inch red oak, and then 6 additional 1 gallon water jugs, another 3/4 inch red oak board, and then an additional 3 1 gallon water jugs following that. We flanked our jugs as best we can, so hopefully if something deviates out the side, we'll still be able to capture it. Hopefully this will do it. Hopefully we can actually get some measurements that we can actually show a difference in the results if we get any difference. Hopefully we just don't end up with exactly the same thing, because I kind of want to see some differences here. It's just hard to do when you're just using just fluid media like water. If you just lined up all the jugs, it takes a tremendous amount to be able to stop it. And I don't really think that's a fair comparison, because these high momentum loadings for the 45 Super and 10mm, for instance, we may see some pretty decent differences when we impact the hard barriers such as this, especially since we're traveling around the same velocity for all the projectiles. So all right, let's go ahead and get this going and see how it shakes out. And first up will be our 9mm. And let's go take a look. So our initial results, we had a good center hit. We easily penetrated our board. Jug 1 is on the ground over there. 2, 3, 4, 5. We're in our 6th jug, which would be the 5th jug after our board, and I don't see the projectile. We had some deviation down, then back up, then out the left side. But let me go ahead and look around and see if I can find that projectile. Well, try as I might, so far I have not been able to find that projectile. It exited out of the 6th jug, so the 5th jug after the board, 6 total, and it looks like it was heading downward because it came in the jug in the bottom, right here, and then it exited out the side, but I don't see anything touching any of the other jugs, so it either just slipped right out or it kind of bounced up and it's just hiding somewhere. So if I find it later, I'll throw it in the final the wrap up. But for now, 6 jugs total of penetration. with 5 after board, so that's about a total of 2 feet of penetration in ordnance gel. The first 4 inches being before the hard barrier, and the rest coming after, so about 20 inches or so after. So about 2 feet total, roughly, is about what this may have represented. So again, I will link in the video description the real world use of this round, so you can see just how this might actually shape up in real world. But let's go ahead and hit the 10 millimeter next and see if we can get a difference in results. This will be the 10 millimeter. All right, let's go see what that did. And it appears we got a result. Our first 2 jugs are destroyed. No surprise here, we're dealing with a good bit more energy than that 9 millimeter round, and we got a good hit on our board, which we actually fractured the board. Although this wood is really dense and hard, it does tend to follow along the grain and fracture a little easier. But at any rate, so we had 2 jugs, so 1 jug, board, 1 jug. This will be jug 3, jug 4, jug 5, and something I'm noticing this round is traveling straighter, and that is something that I wanted to see. The higher momentum round, I'm thinking it probably is going to travel a little straighter after it impacts. And we are trapped in what is jug 7. So 7 jugs total, 1 jug, board, 6 jugs. We have a dent on the back of, or on the face of our 3/4 inch board, but we did not penetrate. So let me go ahead and get that out of there and see if how much it deformed or what we're looking at. And there's a close-up of that round, and it did flatten out on the nose some, so that board is quite tough stuff. We did see an increase in penetration, and we saw straight line penetration. So far, as we compare these two, I'm going to give the edge to the 10 millimeter. So it's good to see at least we have some kind of performance barrier, if you will, where we can actually measure at least a little bit different results. It may be one of those things, or maybe I need to add a couple jugs in front of this 3/4 inch board, or perhaps take out a jug and then see if we'll get through it or not. But for now, we did see increased penetration by 1 jug and a dent in that board, so I'm assuming this would have went into yet another after had the board not been there. How many more, I don't know, but certainly at least 1 more. But at any rate, that is a result. So let's throw the 45 Super in here and see how it stacks up to the 10 millimeter. And next up will be our 45 Super. Let's go check that out. And essentially it looks like we got a mirror image of the 10 millimeter. Obviously more damage insofar as that hydraulic pressure to our jugs in the 9 mil. Again, we're definitely dealing with larger calibers and more energy. Nice center hit. It looks like our board is destroyed, and I will say that did leave the most prominent hole when we piece it back together, which is not surprising. That is a 45 caliber projectile. And we had penetration. We're looking to stay in straight line, straight line, straight line. And I've already seen the dent on the board. I'll go ahead and try to show you that. It actually hit, I mean, they're almost indiscernible between the two. It looks like the Super maybe dented ever so slightly more, but not much difference there. Nothing to write home about anyway. And again, nice straight line penetration. And the projectile is in our 7th jug. So just like 10 mil. And I'll show you that. And there it is. A little less deformation on the nose than the 10 mil. That's probably why I dented that board just slightly more. Because it's a little more rounded than the 10 mil. Probably due to the slightly less velocity. But nonetheless, yeah, so I'm going to still try to look around to see if I can find that 9 millimeter loading. And also, you know what? I have enough material left. I want to try another 9 millimeter loading. We're going to try the 115 grain plus P plus extreme penetrator. I know that round typically will not penetrate as far as a hard cast in just regular fluid material, but I kind of want to see how that's going to work when we introduce this hard barrier. And again, off-camera chronograph results, we're getting about 1,100 1,330 feet per second out of that 115 grain plus P+. So we're going to see a little lighter projectile, higher velocity, higher energy, but we'll see if those little flutes in the extreme penetrator slow it down too much. All right, let's go ahead and check that. Again, this will be the Underwood loaded 115 grain extreme penetrator plus P+. Again, off-camera chronograph results got around 1330, 1340 feet per second. So let's see how this all copper projectile performs in this fluid media with this hard barrier. And just judging by the results, it looks like we got similar performance to that 147 grain hard cast. Our hit on our board, cracked our board. First two jugs mostly destroyed, and then it looks like we have a slight deviation a little down and to the left and towards the end of the track, and there it is. So quite similar to the hard cast, and there's a close-up of that extreme penetrator, and there's absolutely no damage done to that whatsoever, which is not surprising. So this is an interesting result, and the reason I believe this is an interesting result is because these flutes are supposed to impart hydraulic pressure as the round is penetration, and it does. You can see that in a temporary stretch cavity and whatnot when shooting ordnance gel or even milk jugs, and I have seen it in small game. I don't know how much that contributes to permanent wounding in larger critters, but it does create a temporary cavity. But what's interesting is that bleeds off energy and slows the bullet. So if we were just to shoot through just water, I would expect that hard cast to actually penetrate farther. However, hitting this board, this extreme penetrator really didn't perform any different than the hard cast, at least not that I could tell. We did find it on the table, unlike the hard cast that bounced out, but it neither penetrated any additional jugs. So 6 jugs total penetration. So the 1 jug prior to our 3/4 inch board, and then 5 jugs after. So also, I will say this had the lightest recoil by far of any of the rounds fired. This is like shooting a BB gun in comparison, especially to the 10 mm 45 Super. But that is interesting because I didn't expect this to actually get as far. I thought this would slow down quicker. And I will say too, it looked like it actually had less deviation than that hard cast 147 grain. So it could be that round, that 147 grain hard cast a little longer, started to tumble. Like it went down, bounced up off the table. Maybe that affected our overall penetration depths. I'm just not sure. No way to really find out on that. But very interesting result here. And yeah, so just had an extra round lying over. You know what? I have enough material. I'm going to do one more round. It's going to be the 124 grain plus P plus Buffalo Bore flat point full metal jacket. I'm kind of curious to see. Again, it'll be a high energy, high velocity round. And I want to see whether or not the shorter projectile causes less deviation, and will we get the same penetration or possibly more in this setup. So let's give that one a whirl. Since we have just enough material, we can get that done. Again, this will be the 124 grain Buffalo Bore plus P plus flat nose full metal jacket. It's listed as penetrator on the box. It is rated for 1,300 feet per second. I haven't put it over the Chrony, but I see no reason to doubt that. We've gotten that velocity from plenty of other plus P plus rounds. So let's go take a look at that. And what can I say, guys? I have to say that's actually a surprising result. We shattered our board as kind of figured. That's been kind of been a theme, but it looks like we're getting straight line penetration, and we actually kept that straight line penetration all the way into the board, and we mirrored the 10 mm and the 45 Super. I have to say I'm a little bit surprised on that, but I think what's going on is the other projectiles are simply the Extreme Penetrator has the flutes, which will likely reduce your penetration in the fluid media, although it didn't reduce it as much as I thought it would. However, the longer projectiles seem to be more prone to deviating and probably yawing. However, the shorter 124 grain flat nose does not appear to. It had perfect straight line penetration, just like our 10 mil and 45 Super. I haven't found a projectile yet. I don't know where it's at. Hopefully I'll be able to find it, because I want to see if it flattened out the nose or not. So let me go ahead and poke around and see if I can't find that. And our projectile was in our 7th jug. Just like 10 millimeter 45 Super, it simply hit the board, bounced right back in. And you can see how much shorter this little guy is. What I believe is happening is it's just staying more stable traveling through this fluid media, even after it's hitting that board, which is a little surprising. Didn't fully expect that. Very interesting, both in terms of we had similar destruction on our jugs, and we had literally mirror performance in terms of penetration. So that is a little surprising. And again, this is an easy to shoot round, 124 grain plus B+. I don't know. Interesting results. So let's take all this back to the tailgate and give some final thoughts. So final thoughts on all this. Well, for one, I found the 147 grain hard cast. It was several feet off to the side, and all I could see was just the back portion of this red sticking out of the dirt ever so slightly. Not quite sure how it embedded itself that way, but obviously, as you can see, there was some flattening of the nose, but pretty much what you would expect from a hard cast. So we did find that projectile. All right, so what is some final thoughts on all this? Well, one, do any of these results surprise you guys? I will say personally, I'm not too surprised by the 45 Super and the 10 millimeter. I figured these had the potential to do the best. I thought the 10 millimeter might actually give the greatest penetration results. And it may, if we extend it out further. Notice I say it may. There's no real way for me to know. I can say that the 45 Super did look like it put a slightly heavier dent in the board, but I mean, we're really splitting hairs here, guys. The front ends of these appear to be roughly the same diameter in terms of how flat they are, although the 45 did have a slightly larger diameter overall. I will say when we put the boards back together, the 45 had the slightly larger visible hole. Again, not really too surprising considering it's the largest caliber. However, I think what's probably most surprising is our 9mm results, in that this 124 grain Full Metal Jacket flat nose pretty well equaled the penetration, both in terms of straight line penetration and depth, of our 10mm and 45 Super. So I'm not sure that I was quite expecting that. I thought it had a chance of staying straight line just because of its shorter overall length, which you can see it compared to, say, our Extreme Penetrator here. But it is lighter. So I wasn't sure how it was going to react after it hit that board. I wasn't sure how much energy it was going to impart in that board, and maybe even lose a lot of its penetration capability. But it did not seem to. So surprising results. Also, our Extreme Penetrator, a little bit surprising results. I didn't think it would match that hard cast. The 9mm Extreme Penetrator, for whatever reason of how it's designed, does seem to penetrate better than, say, the 10mm version. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case. The flutes do impart some hydraulic pressure and cause a temporary stretch cavity. I don't know how much that really matters in terms of wounding potential, but it does seem to slow the bullet and prevent it from penetrating as far as, say, our hard cast type rounds will do without the hard barrier. However, with the hard barrier, there doesn't seem to be much difference between these two, so that was also pretty interesting. Again, this was the Penetrator was the lightest recoiling load of all of these. So I'm not sure exactly what to say about it, other than service caliber handguns, even these more powerful ones, are more alike than they are different. There were some measurable differences, such as a slightly larger hole with the 45, straight line penetration with the 10mm and one of our 9mm loads, and a little less penetration and not quite straight line with some of the other 9mm loads. So at least there was some measurable difference there. But as far as how these perform in real world for this type of application, all I can say is they all, as far as I know, particularly the 147 grain hardcast, we have an actual documented case of using this against a bear, and I'll link it in the description down below so you can see what actually went on with that. However, the short version of it penetrated fully and lodge under the far side of the hide. Also, if we look at the real world feedback from using these types of projectiles, they're often, more often than not, successful, for one, and as long as the critter is hit, and two, multiple rounds being fired regardless of the caliber seems to be a trend. So I think that might be a better way of approaching this is your specific needs, i.e. how large are the critters that you are planning on encountering. If you're encountering the largest of the large, so to say, maybe somewhere up in Alaska, maybe the 10 mil and 45 Super might be give you a slight advantage in terms of terminal performance. However, your ability to handle the gun and hit with it is still going to be the most important factor, and so that's just dependent on you. I will say the G20, this loading is fairly stout for 10 millimeter loadings in terms of felt recoil, but it's not that bad. However, you do have to have some large hands to wrap your hands comfortably around this grip, which may affect not only your follow-up shots, but overall accuracy. The same can be said for this Mark 23 HK. Again, a very accurate, reliable gun, very durable, can handle these 45 Supers, and actually gives me maybe a reason to have this other than just a range toy and having fun. It's quite comfortable to even shoot the Super in this large handgun because of how well it handles these heavier loads. But again, you have to be able to wrap your hands around it, and they are larger weapons, so maybe the 9 mil from an accuracy point of view might still be your best bet. However, if you can handle these other two, ballistically speaking, I would say the edge goes to the 45 Super just due to the larger projectile, though again, not by much, followed by the 10 millimeter, followed by the 9 millimeter. But again, the difference is not the same as trying to compare to a 500 Magnum or a large caliber rifle. So I hope you found these results surprising. I kind of want to maybe do some more with this. We'll see. We might even change up the testing parameter to see if we can get a little bit different performance. But from what we can measure right now, we can say that given real world feedback, all of these have the potential to give you a fighting chance against even larger critters. And ultimately, I think it's going to depend on you as an individual, where you live, what you have access to, and your capabilities as to what is probably going to be the best fit for you. I might do a 44 Magnum in the future. We'll see. But for right now, that's all we have enough material for today. So if you like this kind of content and you haven't already done so, guys, like and subscribe, share the video, it helps the channel out. As always, comment down below. Let me know what you guys think about this and if you have any data to share. But as always, please keep the comments professional. I'll see you guys next time.